Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. Mr. Tim Loggins with the Patriots of Act 746. And I want to remind everybody that the Patriots of Act 746, they're making this segment possible. And they're on a mission to educate you about your Second Amendment rights here in Arkansas, specifically constitutional carry, the idea of permitless carry. Find out more, go to facebook.com and search for Patriots of Act 746 and ask to be a member to this fantastic group today. Tim, welcome, sir.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing good, Tim. I'm doing good. You've been following the news this morning. I mean, it's kind of wild and stuff. It's definitely campaign season.
I have learned more about politics in the last year than I ever wanted to, I believe. Politics in Arkansas is pretty dirty.
Yeah. No, it really is. It really is. It is a blood sport. Okay, so, Tim, can you give us an update at all on Attorney General Leslie Rutledge? And, you know, we've been waiting on an opinion. Senator Linda Collins Smith sent a letter to her asking for an official opinion about the penalty if you get, you know, if you carry without a permit. And we have not gotten a response yet from that. And I think it's safe to say that we're not going to get one before the primary. That's my fear.
Well, I wish I could give you an update, Paul. I know what you know. Senator Linda Collins Smith asked for that opinion back, I believe, in January. So we're almost at 5 months now since her request, and you're right. We're probably not going to get the opinion issued, and you know, most opinions take 4 weeks or so, maybe 6 weeks, and this one's been 5 months on a relatively simple request. And I can draw some conclusions. I mean, obviously, I think there's some political implications there. We have a primary coming up on the 22nd. Early voting's already started, and I'm afraid that Leslie Rutledge is not wanting to issue that opinion because it's going to sway some voters. Really?
So when Senator Linda Collins Smith writes this letter, obviously she's read the law and she knows that she knows something. So what is it that she knows that she's going to get from an impartial opinion, and just, you know, what is it we're looking for here?
Well, I'm going to start out by saying that Senator Linda Collins Smith is one of the greatest supporters we have in the legislature for our gun rights. She has battled since she's been in office, trying to protect our rights and trying to expand our rights, and she knows what the law says. She's actually a member of Patriots of Act 746, so she knows what 573-120 says. She knows what 573-301 through 326 says. She knows the law. And the law doesn't say that you need a permit to carry concealed, and there's no punishment in the law. Now, that's a plain reading of the laws. So she did that request because a lot of people say, hey, we need some clarification. Well, actually, what we need clarification from is the manufactured confusion that our governor, our attorney general, and others have perpetuated, all to protect a revenue stream for the Arkansas State Police. So Senator Linda Collins Smith was just, you know, hey, clarify this for us, Attorney General. Tell us what the law says. Very simple request, and we can't get an answer in 5 months when there's only 2 statutes to really look at. And, you know, there's got to be some political reasons why she won't issue that opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it would directly contradict what Governor Asa Hutchinson said so, you know, Jan Morgan has made the governor come out and pretend to be a conservative or take really what on face value you might think are hard right positions, but they're really not. But one of those was, all of a sudden he says we have constitutional carry, and he uses that phrase constitutional carry because that's the phrase Jan Morgan was using. But his definition of constitutional carry isn't actually constitutional carry. He just changed, you know, he changed what his phrase was, just like he changed the name from the private option to Arkansas Works. He really didn't alter his opinion at all. He just, you know, started calling it something different to save the Arkansas State Police budget. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir. They're making about $4 million+ a year. I don't know exactly what that fund's for the state police. I've heard it's their retirement fund. I'm not sure about that. You know, it's a case of the governor.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you got 6 days to act before voting commences. Well, early voting is going on right now, but you got 6 days to act to try to stop, to cap the corruption that is here in Arkansas. Matter of fact, somebody texted me this a second ago, which I thought was interesting. Corruption or even the appearance is the hottest selling cologne in Arkansas. Corruption or even the appearance is the hottest selling cologne in Arkansas. It's the hottest concept. It's what all of our officials in power seem to love, is either outright corruption or the appearance of corruption. I'll talk more about that here in a minute, but here's a perfect example of it right here. Yesterday we told you that a judge in Northwest Arkansas had basically stopped these advertisements from being run up in Northwest Arkansas from the Judicial Crisis Network that were pointing out things like, Justice Courtney Goodson, the $50,000 vacation, things like that. Well, this particular judge has a spouse who has received money from Courtney Goodson's trial lawyer husband. Again, let's read this text I got real quick. Corruption, or even the appearance of corruption, is the hottest selling cologne in Arkansas. John Moritz writes, the Northwest Arkansas judge who ordered that attack ads critical of Supreme Court Justice Courtney Goodson be taken off the air this week reported receiving income through his wife from the law firm of Goodson's husband. Washington County Circuit Judge Doug Martin issued a temporary restraining order Monday against several television stations in the area that had been airing ads that Goodson alleged to be false, misleading, and defamatory. Goodson is married to class action attorney John Goodson, a partner at the Texarkana firm of Keel and Goodson. In his 2017 statement of financial interest, Martin reported that his wife, Amy, earned more than $12,500 for legal services performed at Keel and Goodson. Statements of financial interest don't give specific amounts of compensation, but rather whether compensation is at least a specific amount. So it was at least $12,500. Again, here in Arkansas, corruption, or even the appearance, is the hottest selling cologne in Arkansas. Folks, I tell you, it is beyond what any of you out there, and even I, can imagine. I really believe that. Speaking of corruption, Senator Jeremy Hutchinson is back in the news. Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, I guess we're right in the wake of the Hank Wilkins guilty plea, where it is widely suspected that Hank Wilkins, in that guilty plea, when you go read the plea, Senator A is, in fact, Jeremy Hutchinson. Now, what did Wilkins plead guilty to? He pleaded guilty to getting basically kickbacks, getting money to pass laws that, entities wanted. And so Senator A is mentioned it several times. Now, and everybody's got to say this, right? Everybody feels the need to say this. It's clear Senator A has not been accused of a crime, and that, yeah, okay, we get that. We know that. Senator A hasn't been accused of a crime yet. We get it. We get it. Yet. We get it. I remember when John Woods hadn't been accused of a crime yet. He was Senator A. Remember when John Woods, when Mike and Neil pled guilty, we were reading that plea, there was Senator A. Senator A was in a plea too. And you know who Senator A was? John Woods. And John Woods didn't get indicted for a little while. And then John Woods got indicted. Now, is this going to happen this time? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure whether or not you're going to have an indictment of Jeremy Hutchinson. But I will tell you this, it's certainly not going to happen before May 22nd, is it? He's certainly not going to be indicted before May 22nd. That would be bad, right? That wouldn't look too good. Hey, you know what? Speaking of that, hey, Joe, first of all, throw the Arkansas Times article up here. Let's talk more about Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, because this is in the news where he is now being sued by Centennial Bank for a $50,000 loan that he's defaulted on. It was a business loan. And there he is. Here he is. Nephew number 2, everybody. Those of you watching over at Facebook.com/Conduit News, there he is, nephew number 2. Senator Jeremy Hutchinson in default, according to Benjamin Hardy at the Arkansas Times. They're actually building off of an Arkansas Business article. Arkansas Business has the scoop here. So scrolling down here, what does it say? Arkansas Business has the scoop on a lawsuit against Senator Jeremy Hutchinson by Centennial Bank of Conway, which says the legislator is in default on a business loan the bank originated in 2011. There's the lawsuit in Pulaski County. The complaint states Hutchinson owes a balance of about $30,000 on the loan, which was originally in the amount of $50,000 plus interest and late fees. Hutchinson, who is the nephew of Governor Asa Hutchinson, nephew number 2, is not running for re-election this year. He attracted attention recently when a federal bribery plea agreement by former state representative Hank Wilkins, a Democrat from Pine Bluff, referenced a state senator who matches Hutchinson's description. The plea, not physical description, matches his description, and how many times he served, how many terms he served in the House, how many terms he served in the Senate. Can you imagine if indictments described people's physical attributes instead of... That would be funny. Representative Hank Wilkins referenced a state senator who matches Hutchinson's descriptions. The plea agreement does not state Hutchinson committed any wrongdoing and has not been accused of a crime. So let's game this out for a second. What if, and I want to be clear here, this is purely speculative, but what if after the primary, there are more indictments? And what if those indictments reflect poorly, not just potentially on the governor's family relatives, but the governor himself? What if it reflects poorly on the governor? How do you think the Democrats are going to behave if that is the case? And listen, I know I'm speculating here, and this drives some people upset or drives some people mad, but it's just a gut feeling that I have as I look at the broad spectrum of things. I also look at how, when it comes to this stuff, eventually everything, it just seems, if you look at a broad overview of what's been going on the last 2.5 years, Conduit News has been correct. We kind of can see where things are going. A lot of people can. It's not rocket science. So when I say after the primary, if there are more indictments to come, and those indictments make Republican leadership look real. I mean, why do you think nephew number one, when he assumed the head of the Arkansas Senate next year, as the president pro tem, Jim Hendren, when the Arkansas Senate officially became a state agency under Asa Hutchinson by putting nephew number one in charge, why do you think he said to the paper, well, I'm going to use my tenure here to focus on restoring confidence in this body and, really focusing on the ethics of this body? Why? Do you think he knows something? Do you think he knows what's coming? Or do you think he believes something is coming that's going to make the reputation of the Arkansas Senate even worse than it already is? I think so. Again, it's not rocket science. It doesn't take a genius to try to predict where this is all headed. Now, if you'll stay with me for a moment, and this is just speculative, prediction or whatever, it's just an instinct that I have, and the instinct is this. If there are more indictments after the primary that expose the good old boy system and at the very least make our governor look suspect, do you think the Democrats could possibly use that to go on and win in November? And my gut feeling says that it's possible. And because of that, I think this primary between Jan Morgan and Asa Hutchinson is even more significant than previously thought. I mean, not to mention the fact that, if Asa gets 4 more years, it's going to be really bad for the Republican Party just in general, outside of any of the corruption thing. I'm just saying from a policy standpoint, conservatives are just not going to get anything. Okay? And that's, everybody knows that. We're still resisting, though. I'm talking about the fact that in the Republican primary, if these indictments happen after the primary, you could make a case that a vote for Asa would actually be a vote for the Democrat in November. Now, I know that drives you Marble Palace establishment types crazy, but forget. Somebody told me the other day, state representative, I heard through the grapevine, said, a lot of people love Paul and a lot of people hate him. Well, just forget the messenger for a second and hear me out. Hear me out, because you Marble Palace types, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know exactly what probably some of you are thinking too, what we've heard for 2 years about how the FBI has been running around this state. And, people are scared. People have been, did you hear so-and-so? I think he was wearing a wire. We heard that about 2 years ago. If you think that all of this stops with Randall Shelton and John Woods, you are mistaken. Respectfully, you're mistaken here. If you go read that Hank Wilkins guilty plea and you think that's where it's going to end, you are naive. So hear me out. What if? Now, first off, it's going to look terrible. If the primary is over and then these indictments come out, how did they make that happen? Who pulled what string to make that happen? To hold back the indictments to come. That's going to look real suspect, isn't it? That's going to look real, I don't know, the type of stuff that's going on that, gives a credibility to the concept of a deep state. which I think we all know. I mean, if you just look at what's going on, is real and exists. Tell me what you think. You can sound off over at facebook.com/Conduit News. And you can give me a text message or a phone call, 870-275-9799. I'm telling you right now, you have no idea the level of corruption. We are only seeing the beginning of it. And if all of this comes out after the primary, it will help the Democrats, and it will not help the Republicans. And you say, well, you know, Hank Wilkins was a Democrat. It doesn't matter, because you know who controls the media? The Democrats. Because they believe in the Democrats more. They're just tolerating Republicans. Kind of have a resentment for us, the people that have been voting for reform. But we're not getting the reform, are we? No, we're not. We haven't gotten it. I know it's a big question. I know it's an inflammatory question, but my question is still, I can't help it. This is my gut feeling. Does a vote for Asa Hutchinson in the Republican primary translate to a vote for the Democrat if, after the primary, all of the floodgates open that have been held back, that apparently have been held back? Again, this is just speculation on my part, but it's just a gut feeling that I have. We have to cap corruption. We have to vote to cap corruption. And the only way to do that is to vote for the candidate that understands that government is too big and the people suffer when the government is too large. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell. Back in a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist health care program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, real quick, did you hear the national news about what Seattle is doing? Amazon, Starbucks are reportedly furious after Seattle passed a controversial homeless tax. Amazon is not alone in its anger. Starbucks took a moment away from signaling its virtue and lashed out at the city's new tax. John Kelly, Senior Vice President, Global Public Affairs and Social Impact at Starbucks, said this city continues to spend without reforming and fail without accountability, while ignoring the plight of hundreds of children sleeping outside. If they cannot provide a warm meal and safe bed to a 5-year-old, no one believes they will be able to make housing affordable or address opiate addiction. This city pays more attention to the desires of the owners of illegally parked RVs than families seeking emergency shelter. So essentially, they decided to tax businesses more because they have this homeless problem in Seattle because real estate prices have gone so high. And anyway, you know what my first thought was when I heard this? That they're going to raise now $50 million, they say, if they tax businesses with this new business tax. It's called a big business tax. My first thought was, as an Arkansan, is nobody tell nephew number one, Jim Hendren, on the task force, he doesn't need any more ideas on how to raise more money. Good grief. After Jan Morgan got Asa to actually, I don't know, stand by his 2006 position that he wants to completely eliminate the grocery tax and he doesn't support raising it, now the task force is looking for new ways of, that was going to be our get. That's what we were going to do. We were going to tax the rich. We're going to give an income tax credit to low-income people so they could still buy their groceries at a discount or get a, basically earned income tax credit, which is a, welfare program. And that's not supposed to be a Republican idea. But they were going to, middle-class and rich people, you can afford to pay 6.5% on your groceries. Well, now that's out the window. So now they're looking at a state property tax is best I can tell. Who knows? Maybe the Arkansas tax farce will look at the great conservative bastion of Seattle for more conservative ideas. Back in a minute.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The governor's perception is his reality, and he's defining what reality is when he defines constitutional carry as you can carry open, but you need a permit to carry concealed. And, oh, by the way, check with your local prosecutor to see if you can do either one of those.
Yeah, even do that.
That's not reality.
Yeah, it's Wild West.
That's not reality.
Yeah, so if Leslie Rutledge were to issue this opinion, and all of a sudden we found out there's no penalty for concealing a weapon without a permit, then that's going to make it out like our chief executive officer is diminishing our Second Amendment rights by fiat, by his word, which actually, because I believe an armed society is a polite society, actually makes us less safe when it comes to being able to exercise our human right to freely defend ourselves. It's my
I agree 100%, Paul. I agree 100%. And I'm going to go further than that. It's not just about the governor, although it would make him look bad. Leslie Rutledge painted herself into a corner with her opinion back in 2015. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals has actually come out in opposition of portions of that opinion. You know, the police can't stop you simply because a weapon's seen. Her opinion in 15 said that they could. And there's implications for other races as well. I mean, you've got supporters of this enhanced carry that was passed last session that are touting that as them being pro-Second Amendment. You've got Bob Ballinger. You've got James Sturch. You've got politicians across the state who say they support the Second Amendment. And if Leslie Rutledge come out right now, it wouldn't just hurt just the governor, and it wouldn't just help Jan Morgan. I mean, Senator Linda Collins Smith is in a primary battle, and her opponent is using her no vote against that enhanced carry to say she's not for the Second Amendment, and this would be good press for her if Leslie Rutledge come out with an opinion that says what the law is.
Yeah.
So I think she's playing politics across the board. It's not just about the governor's race, although it is about the governor's race.
Yeah.
But you got a lot of politicians that's going to benefit with no opinion being issued.
Yeah, that is a shame, and I've been people have been sending me James Sturch mailers that are just so inaccurate. It's really sad how inaccurate his mailers are and how he's lying about his record. And yeah, I'll use that word. He's lying. He said.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Now, did you see the Arkansas Times piece on Bob Ballinger? Boy, that was extensive. I think it was like 10 pages long. We'll probably get to that. It was certainly very detailed stuff on the tangled web of Ecclesia and General Improvement Fund money and the FOIA and everything else. Very, very interesting. By the way, I saw in Bob Ballinger's financials that he filed, there's money from Michael Morton and David Norsworthy nursing homes. Okay, here we go. Let's welcome back to the program, folks. We talked on Friday, I guess, but welcome back. We've got Tim Loggins with us, and we got Dan Borum from the Patriots of X746. How are you guys doing?
Good morning, Paul. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. I want to remind you.
Very good, Paul. Thank you.
Yes, this portion of the program brought to you by the Patriots of X746. Folks, if you just go to Facebook.com and you search for Patriots of X746 and ask to join their group, they are on a mission to educate Arkansans about your Second Amendment rights, specifically Arkansas law, the Arkansas Constitution, and what is called constitutional carry, and it is a reality in this state that you don't need a license to carry a weapon. Guys, I glad that we talked on Friday about what really was exposing some of the parts where the NRA got it wrong when they came out with their endorsements, and I understand you guys have formally put together on paper why why, I guess, your amendments to some of what the NRA said.
That's right, Paul. We saw some really egregious errors in what the NRA was doing. And give you a little background on it. We have politicians in Arkansas that look towards these NRA rankings, and they almost vote out of fear that they'll be downgraded or get a knock from the NRA. And the NRA actually doesn't even look at the consequence of Arkansas law. I mean, let's be honest. NRA supports infringements. They support the handgun licensing scheme, and Arkansas's constitutional carry state. And to combat some of that, we issued our own scorecards and gave the candidates grades on their stance on the Second Amendment and gun rights.
Well, and I've read it. I think it was a really balanced. I thought it was really good. Matter of fact, let's throw it up there. Let's see if we can. Can you throw it up there, Joe? I don't know. There it is. So, Patriots Vac 746, Arkansas's largest gun rights advocacy group. First of all, Dan Borum, talk about how even being able to make that statement, how awesome that is.
Oh, Paul, that is a very awesome statement, and to be a part of something that is so grassroots and constitutional. I feel extremely honored. I feel extremely honored to be able to get on the phone this morning and represent all of the members of the Patriots of Act 746. They're awesome people who stand upon the Constitution and are fighting for what is not necessarily written on paper that gives us the right, but it's a right that's given to us by our Creator.
Yeah, that's really, really good. All right, so with the statewide races, Governor, you give Asa Hutchinson a C-, you give Jan Morgan an A, and it says that you guys have endorsed Jan Morgan for governor. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, I know the NRA gave Governor Hutchinson an A-, which was a slight downgrade, but I mean, let's be honest, he's failed to correctly recognize the definition of constitutional carry. He's called our Second Amendment rights a privilege. He couldn't even support a simple campus carry bill that was advanced by Linda Collins Smith and Charlie Collins, and that turned into that enhanced mess that we got. And he even said, that individual county prosecutors would have the authority to prosecute someone for carrying a weapon based upon their individual interpretation of 573-120. And quite honestly, I thought I was being magnanimous, giving him a C-. We really talked about this, and he is not a supporter of gun rights. He's just not. And you juxtapose that with Jan Morgan. She's a national Second Amendment advocate. She's said on day one she will clarify the law in Arkansas, and she has our endorsement.
Absolutely.
So Dan, you agree with Tim there? He feels he was being magnanimous by giving the C-. That's suggesting that it could actually be lower than a C-.
Actually, I asked him if he had any feedback since we had scored last Friday, and I told him the only feedback that I received was that a few people had told me that they thought that we were being way too nice with the governor, and that he should have received a lower grade. So what that tells me is that most of the people who are fighting for their Second Amendment rights, their inalienable rights, are not pleased at all with the governor that we currently have in Arkansas, and they're looking for a change.
Secretary of State is the next one. That race is Trevor Drown versus John Thurston. You give Trevor Drown a B+, and you give John Thurston an A Q, which is just basically qualifier. He's right. Tell us what the Q means again.
Paul, if you don't have a voting record on Second Amendment issues, we will do a Q for qualified, and that's going to be based upon your statements and your interviews with Patriots Vac 746. It's what you're saying. That's what your rhetoric is.
Yeah. Okay.
So that can change once they get in office. Trevor got a B+ because he does support the enhanced carry scheme. He believes in permitting. He hasn't advocated one way or another, and he says he's a supporter of the Second Amendment, but his actions show that he supports the permits. John Thurston, I've spoken to him several times myself, and while he wasn't really educated when he started this process, he is a supporter of constitutional carry, and that gives him an AQ.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Next up, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. Obviously, she's not running. She's not challenged right now in this primary season. But Dan, talk about this score of a C-.
When Leslie was running for office, and I voted for Leslie, she ran on a strong platform of supporting the Second Amendment with no infringements. And now that she has, after she got in office, and we called her out on Act 746 to interpret plainly what it says, so the population in Arkansas would hear it from the top attorney in Arkansas. She opted out to protect the coffers of the Arkansas State Police to go along with her governor, rather than coming out and letting the people of Arkansas know exactly what it says. It's not hard to interpret. It's very easy to interpret. And as long as you do not have an unlawful intent, then you can carry without a permit, concealed or open. But what she said, and she said it, I watched her on TV, what she said is, yes, the law did make open carry legal, but you still have to have a permit to conceal carry. She blew it with the patriots of Act 746 and many other people in Arkansas, because she knows exactly what the law says, and she opted out to protect the money. Therefore, that's why she received the grade that she did.
Okay.
And also, when Linda Collins Smith has called her out to give us the law or show us what the penalty is if you do carry concealed without a permit, and we still have not received an answer from her. And what has it been, like almost 5 months now?
Yeah, well, very long
been
time.
Asked of her. You know that she's not going to come out. If she does it all, it'll be after the primary.
We were just talking about what else could come after the primary.
Exactly.
Gosh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Paul, I want to add to that. Not only did she issue an opinion in 2015, I believe, that was incorrect. Yes. She didn't cite the law whenever she said that you still have to have a permit. She didn't show why you had to have it.
Right.
She just made that assumption, and folks bought into it. And part of her opinion has actually been overturned by the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals when she said that police officers can stop you because you're open carrying. Well, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals disagrees with that portion of her opinion. She just has not been a friend to our gun rights. And I think she's done it in a cool, calculated political fashion. And given her a C-, I believe she earned that.
Okay, moving down on your list, Joe, scrolling down, we're talking with Dan Borm and Tim Loggins from the Patriots of Act 746. All right, we're moving on from statewide races and going into local districts, starting with Senate District. District 5, you gave State Representative Bob Ballinger a C- and State Senator Brian King an A, and you're actually endorsing Brian King over Bob Ballinger. What is the logic there? Let's start with Tim and then go to Dan.
Paul, Representative Ballinger authored the enhanced carry bill. Whenever the governor said he couldn't endorse campus carry, Bob Ballinger actually wrote the enhanced carry. He also sponsored HB, I believe it's 1889, that would have gutted 573-120. In essence, the law that states we're a constitutional carry state, he tried to gut it. He introduced that bill, and it died in committee, but he still tried to run it. And basically, Representative Ballinger, he's shown that he will sponsor government infringements and government intrusion all the time that he's saying that he's trying to clarify our rights. And he is earned that C-. He is not a friend of constitutional carry. He's not a friend of our gun rights.
Dan,
Brian King, on the other hand, Brian King authored the law that allowed churches to decide whether their parishioners could carry inside their church or not. He removed government restrictions with that law, and Bob Ballinger supports increasing infringement.
Yeah, Dan.
And that's why Brian gets our endorsement.
Dan Borum, talk a little bit about that aspect. I mean, you being a pastor, and now because of Brian King, you guys can set your own protection security policies.
That's absolutely correct, and I also live in District 5, so one of these men will be serving as my senator, and I agree with Tim wholeheartedly as to why Bob received the grade that he did, Representative Ballinger, and why Senator King received the grade that he did. As a pastor, I detest any government involvement in the church that I pastor. And there are so many reasonings. My First Amendment right, and then going into my Second Amendment right, as to whether I can carry or not. The government has no place in telling a church what they can do concerning their Second Amendment right. If they can do that, then Paul, why can they not also start telling us what we can do with our First Amendment right?
Mm-hmm.
You see, that's what people don't understand. As passionate as I am about the Second Amendment, my First Amendment right, I'm very passionate about, because if they have a right over, if they have say-so in our Second Amendment right, then why can they not come in and also say, this is what you can preach and this is what you cannot preach? You cannot preach against any kind of marriage between two men or two women.
Yeah.
Because the government recognizes it, and you cannot.
Right. Yeah.
And you cannot preach against that.
It certainly is a slippery slope. Oh,
it's a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
And also, looking at, as I listened to these two men debate, and I heard them debate concerning their legislation on gun rights and the differences of their legislation. Once again, it's very clear that Representative Ballinger brings more government into our Second Amendment rights, while Brian King is fighting to remove government from our Second Amendment rights. Do you want less government or do you want more government? And so it's very easy then for the patriots of Act 746 to clearly endorse Brian King because of how he has legislated in the past.
We're talking with Patriots of Act 746, Tim Loggins and Dan Borum. They've released this scorecard and giving grades, correcting some of the things where the NRA got wrong because they're not a state-focused organization, so they missed the context of a lot of this stuff. Moving on to District 19, State Representative James Sturch, you give him a C, and you give Senator Linda Collins Smith an A+ in this primary, and have actually endorsed Senator Linda Collins Smith. Tim, talk about that race.
Pretty simple, no-brainer. Representative Sturch got a C, quite honestly, because he has a lack of record on gun rights. There was not very much we could go on. He refused to talk to us at any point over the past year. I made numerous requests and trying to get his stance on gun rights, and Representative Sturch refused to talk to Patriots. We had to go back to 2015 to some Facebook posts and some Conduit posts where he said the law was unclear and he would support legislation to clarify it, which means infringements and permits. I do have some anecdotal evidence that I was talking to a citizen of Cave City that Mr. Sturch told that gentleman, who's a veteran, that he didn't think folks should be walking around with guns on their hips. But not having much to go on and knowing that Mr. Sturch has never really advocated for our gun rights and that he voted for the enhanced carry miss, he gets a C, and that's a very generous C. When you compare that to Linda Collins Smith, who's been a champion of our gun rights, she's a champion of constitutional carry. She fights every session down there for our gun rights. She's been endorsed by Gun Owners of America. That's unheard of, Paul. Gun Owners doesn't get involved in local races, and they endorsed her.
Wow.
The only candidate that I'm aware of in Arkansas that's been endorsed by them.
Wow.
So, yeah, she's an A+, and she has our endorsement.
Yeah, I didn't know that, Dan. Gun Owners of America, that is a big deal for them to get involved in a state race.
Absolutely. That speaks volumes for Linda Collins Smith. And here's something that I would like for those out there who are listening. You know, there may be a lot of people that puts a lot of stock to the NRA scorecard, but I want to tell you something. I know for a fact, I know it for an absolute fact, that one particular representative that was elected during the last election cycle, he was not a member of the NRA. And he was told that if he doesn't become a member of the NRA, then there's going to be a lot of these old backwood country boys that's not going to vote for him because that's the first thing they look for. He ran straight out there and sent the money to him to be a lifelong member. And so now by his resume, he is a lifelong member of the NRA. And so, look, it's a joke, really. Just because you have that written down by your resume does not mean that you are an advocate or a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. It doesn't even mean you understand what the Second Amendment stands for, why it's there.
Yeah.
People, please understand, it's not there so that we can have a gun to go hunting with or even have a gun to go out and shoot sporting clays. It is there to prevent tyranny. And that is the sole purpose of the Second Amendment.
That's very well said. All right, we're running out of time, guys. Let's get through the rest of it. Scrolling down, I guess is this the last one? Let me see here. District 53. We got two more in the State House. A primary between Dr. Kolpeck. You give him a B+Q. And State Representative Dan Sullivan, you give him an A, and you've endorsed State Representative Dan Sullivan. Talk about that.
I spoke to Dr. Peck at length. We had probably a 2.5-hour phone call, and it started out talking about gun rights. And the first thing he told me was he has a permit and he's proud of it. And when I asked him about constitutional carry, he did not know what that was. He said, "Is that the open carry law?" He was very uneducated about Arkansas laws. He was quick to tell me he has a Class 3 permit. He's quick to tell me that he's got a CHCL from Arkansas, and so does his spouse. And he was proud of those things. And as I explained the law to him, he said, "Oh, yeah, I can support that." Not being educated, not having a voting record, to me, that's not an A, which the NRA gave him an A-. You juxtapose that with Dan Sullivan, who's been a champion of gun rights. Dan has come to every Northeast Arkansas Patriots chapter meeting. He's pledged to not advance any legislation that unless it advances our constitutional rights. And he's an A, and he's endorsed.
Yeah, that's great. So real quick, and talk real quick because we do have to go to break. The last race, Dan Borum, District 91. You guys have endorsed Scott Richardson with an A- over State Representative Dan Douglas, whose middle name is Tax Increase. Real quick, yes. Dan Borum, why did you guys get involved in this one?
We need to be involved in every one of them, Paul, and the reason that we are involved in this one is Douglas has showed with his voting record the things that he has stated that he is always for infringement upon our rights. He's always for the tax increase, and that's why we've endorsed Scott on this one.
Yeah. Well, that's good. We've interviewed Scott Richardson a few times, and he does seem to have a more conservative bent, certainly, than State Representative Dan Douglas, who couldn't help but, really just be a part of that whole Marble Palace system. I appreciate it. Tim Loggins, Dan Borum with the Patriots of Act 746. We sure appreciate you guys coming on. You guys have a great day, okay?
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
folks.
you, Paul, and please understand we'll be coming out with more endorsements for the general election.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad you guys are doing this because it's very, very helpful. Folks, go to Facebook.com, search for Patriots of Act 746. If you want to share this PDF document, go there and get it. Ask to be a member. It's really an Arkansas sensation, people who care about the human right of self-defense. Back in just a moment.
Arkansans need a true judicial conservative on the Supreme Court. David Sterling is that man. Sterling believes in the separation of powers in our government, and he will interpret the Constitution based on the original intent of the Founding Fathers. A member of the NRA and the Christian Legal Society, Sterling will serve Arkansans with honor and integrity as our next Supreme Court Justice. On May 22nd, vote David Sterling.
Paid for by Friends of David Sterling.
With public corruption and scandals in the news daily, Arkansans need someone with honesty and integrity in the state Senate. Mark Johnson is that man. Mark Johnson isn't a politician. He's a fifth-generation Arkansan and a successful small business owner. Mark Johnson will make ethics a priority and demand swift punishment for those who violate the public trust. Mark Johnson is pro-life and supports the Second Amendment. In the Republican primary, vote Mark Johnson for the state Senate. Paid for by Mark Johnson for Arkansas.
It's been said that freedom is in the DNA of every American, and I would say every Arkansan. Our nation and state are now in danger of letting our God-given freedom slip away by allowing government to be the arbiter of freedom. I agree with President Ronald Reagan, who said, and I quote, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem," end quote. Government is too large, too overreaching, and too corrupt. President Reagan also said, and I quote, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help,'" end quote. This race is about voting for the candidate who best represents your interest, your family, and your future. For the last 2 terms in office, I've kept my promises to you, and I ask for your help to continue to represent our joint values of faith, family, and a protected future. I'm State Representative Dan Sullivan, and the choice is clear. I ask for your vote to continue our stand for freedom. Early voting is underway, and the election is May 22nd.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I was talking to a friend who listens to the program almost every morning yesterday, and he said, "You know, Paul, as I've been listening, and I've been listening to to you for years," he says there's something different about the program because there is just a sense of urgency that is different about it. That he said that's what I would describe as that this program is now about urgency, and that's true. We are urgently trying to build the liberty machine. We are urgently trying to get the truth to the people because we want to end the corruption that is rampant throughout our government, either the appearance of it or outright corruption. And we're seeing it in the headlines every single day. Again, either the appearance of it or outright corruption. And I just want to reiterate something to you that we talked about at the very beginning of the program today. What happens after the primary? Are there going to be more indictments that expose the Marble Palace Court, that make people vulnerable, that make people look bad? And how will the progressive leftists use that? Because it will be the majority party that will get most of the blame for that. And that's why this primary is so important. That's why getting out and going to vote to cap corruption is so important. And that is why that is why, if you look at Jan Morgan, why it is so important to recognize her as the anti-establishment, anti-career politician, anti-status quo candidate that she is. And yes, I'm seeing more and more signs. It seems like every single day. There's only 6 more days until Election Day. Go vote. One more hour coming your way next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
He is, supporting school choice, yet he voted against it. And if he's trying to say that Linda not voting for the enhanced carry bill is anti-Second Amendment, I mean, I don't see how. I mean, that's just, it's a context thing. They're counting on people not understanding what actually went on down there and the tricks and the legislative sleight of hand that went on. There's no way, if you saw what happened, I mean, that you would want to support a bill that just was it was all a political consideration for the governor so that he wouldn't look bad and veto a Second Amendment bill. And that's why you ended up getting what you got. And it was just sick to me to watch these people just bow down to him when they've got all the authority in the legislature, and they could have done whatever they wanted to do with the Second Amendment, and the Republican majority would have voted for it, and he would have just had to have dealt with it, but they didn't want to do that. Anyway.
Well, we find, Paul, that those that cry the loudest about them being for freedom and limited government and probably aren't. Charlie Collins and Linda Collins Smith both had simple campus carry bills that were perverted because the governor didn't want to sign it. And I don't know if it was because he was getting pressure from Walmart or from the SEC or who it was, or if he truly believes the Second Amendment is a privilege and not a right.
He said it many times. On at least 2 occasions. I'm going to take him at his word. He said it's a privilege, that we have a Second Amendment privilege. He said it multiple times. I know. Allegedly, he's in a private conversation. He said, that they're synonymous with rights. No, they're not. It's not. It doesn't convey the same thing. A right is something that's yours. A privilege is something that is, going to be taken away or can be taken away. I feel like the governor thinks the Second Amendment is really just about hunting, and I think if you want to carry one of those handgun thingies. And this is just I'm trying to channel him. I think he would. I think he wants you to check in with the government first before you can carry one of those. That's what I think.
I believe it's a deeply philosophical argument that we need to have. I believe the governor does believe it's a privilege and not a right, because he believes in government control. I can say the same thing about Leslie Rutledge now, and that disappoints me. She put out a piece on social media about I will always defend your Second Amendment rights. And she's wearing creased camouflage that just came off the shelf and holding some type of weapon like she was holding a guitar.
Who is this now?
Leslie Rutledge.
Oh, okay.
The Attorney General.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
And honestly, Paul, I mean, they're pandering to folks like us that cherish our gun rights, and once every election cycle, they put out a photo of them in camo and say that has something to do with the Second Amendment. And they really don't believe in the Second Amendment. They think it's about hunting. They believe in government control. And I'm sorry, Attorney General, but I can draw no other conclusion. You're playing politics with my rights. We need an opinion. We requested it. We deserve it. And you're playing politics with it, and that should have some consequences.
Yeah. Well, if it's been 5 months, I mean, that normally opinions don't take 5 months to be released. In the press, the standard is when a legislator writes and asks for an opinion from the Attorney General provides it. Just tell us what the law says. Oh my goodness. Hey Tim, I want to talk to you about a story that broke yesterday. We interviewed Luther Suter, the attorney, and his client Heath Harris. They're suing Asa Hutchinson in his official capacity as governor and personally because he said he was fired because he didn't hire who Asa wanted. He was a poultry commission and livestock commission employee, and he hired who he thought to be more qualified. Asa says, allegedly. Well, the idea is, Asa hasn't responded at all. But in the complaint, he was fired because he didn't hire who the governor wanted. That's essentially the gist of it. So I'm just curious. You've been, in Arkansas a long time. Is that the culture at state agencies that if you don't, toe the line, that your job's at stake? I'm just curious to get your reaction.
When I was reading that lawsuit online, Paul, I was shaking my head and laughing, actually.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
He says liberty's on the march, but the marble palace sure has its ways. And the voters who believe realize they've been deceived when words are weighed next to deeds. Asa doesn't care about our Constitution. His conservatism is an illusion. Line item vetoes and higher taxes. We all voted for him once, but he won't make spending cuts. Let's all vote and say, hey Asa, we won't get fooled again. The carefully crafted talk puts the people into shock. Once the light of truth exposes all the lies. With the nephews in control and the criminals on parole, the only thing the people can do is vote. Asa doesn't care about our Constitution. His conservatism is an illusion. Line item vetoes and higher taxes. We all voted for him once, but he won't make spending cuts. Let's all vote and say, hey Asa, we won't get fooled again.
These beats
Paul
are dope.
Harrell. Parody.
Hey, welcome to the program. It's hour number 2, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. That's right. Rocking out to my own jams. Yeah, I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, 6 days. 6 days till primary. You can early vote right now. Go vote. Take 10 people with you. Vote to cap corruption. You know whose real job it is to cap corruption? Joe, do you know whose real job it should be to be capping corruption? Yes. Thank you, Joe. Governor Asa Hutchinson. Why do I get the feeling that instead of capping corruption, Asa has fertilized an environment where it's easier to be, for this stuff to happen? I mean, why this is his legislature, right? They do what he says. And if people say, well, no, the legislature's independent, the governor's nephew is now the head of the Arkansas Senate. Get real. Quit lying to yourself. Look at this objectively, right? Or give me evidence to suggest the contrary. I mean, there's some good things when we stop the internet tax and we stop the gas tax. Okay, we play defense there, but look at some of the other stuff. Look at any time there's a conservative candidate that tries to challenge somebody that like an actual conservative candidate that tries to challenge an incumbent. The governor supports the incumbents that are going to execute his agenda, and he opposes the incumbents that are resisting his agenda. This is his. And he's, you know, this is his legislature. That is clear. This is all in his lap. I mean, ask yourself the question. People talk about, we've got this lawsuit, Asa Hutchinson being sued because he allegedly, the governor's office told a poultry commission board member or a poultry commission employee that they had to hire this person who was not qualified, and when they refused and they hired the more qualified person and not the good old boy person, then the poultry commission employee was fired. And that's what the lawsuit's about, right? So we're talking about that type of lawsuit, but I'm beginning to wonder if we should sue the government for not holding Ecclesia College accountable, for not auditing. You know, the state agencies here we should be trying to audit what's been going on. They stole our money. They paid for a $600,000 land deal. This is we need, and they're not going to give us the documents. They're not going to show us how the money was spent. They're not going to show us where it goes. Where is the governor trying to hold taxpayer money accountable when it's going to places in an untransparent way? Where is that? Does a lawsuit need to be filed against the government to compel them to hold others accountable with taxpayer money? Again, capping corruption. We're going to go vote to cap corruption. But the governor of Arkansas should have already been attempting to do that. Where is his plan for reform? Aside from just giving himself all the general improvement money to dole out from the governor's office instead of the individual legislators. Where is his plan to curb corruption in Arkansas based on what we're seeing in the headlines daily? Where is the plan? Marble Palace legislators listening to this right now, ask yourself, why hasn't your governor come up with a plan to reform the corrupt system that we have? Where is it? Why is the only one that actually has a decent plan somebody the government opposes and calls irrelevant? Why is Senator Brian King the only one who has tried not once, not twice, but several times to get a Medicaid disclosure bill filed to expose how many of you are actually making money on the side off of this $2 billion scam that goes to insurance companies every single year, to prop them up with a guaranteed revenue stream paid for by we the people that are oppressed by this system? How come it's Brian King that is doing this over and over, and he's the one that's met with disdain from the Marble Palace because he's so anti-establishment? And do we have to ask why? Do we have to ask why ACE's endorsed Bob Ballinger? It's not a surprise. It's not a surprise at all. And I just am saying right now, the person that should be capping corruption is our own governor. And instead, I think he's fertilizing an environment that makes it possible. I mean, just look, Michael Lamoureux was his chief of staff. That guy got $120,000, quote, legally, end quote. Right? He got a $120,000 bonus, but he's an attorney, so it's okay. And then as soon as that was found out, he was whisked away. Who else has been whisked away? Who else was maybe a senator and now they got another job somewhere? They're somewhere else. Start looking into that, why don't you? Also start looking into, and we talked about this first hour. If you missed the first hour, the first segment of the first hour, you need to go listen to it. And because I'm telling you, just have a gut feeling that after the primary, We've been hearing for years that there are a lot of indictments that are supposed to come, and not just the ones that have already happened. Not just the guilty pleas, not just the indictments of John Woods. Now John Woods has been found guilty, Senator Woods. We've been hearing for a long time that there's so much more that's going to come out. And I'm thinking, why hasn't it come out yet? Well, I think we know it's certainly not going to come out until after the primary to see where everybody's chips fall. Certainly that's the case. Capping corruption. The people, we are forced, ladies and gentlemen, to go do this ourselves. Government must be tended to, and it is our responsibility to tend to it. Liberty must be tended to. It's our responsibility to take action. We have 6 days to do so, and you need to call your friends. You need to talk to everybody in your sphere of influence. I talked to a guy the other day who was doing just that. I want you to think about, and I know a lot of people, you don't want to make friends, but you don't want to lose friends is what I mean. But ever think about how this concept of not talking religion and politics means that you don't ever really have a relationship with anybody because you don't even know how they truly feel because we're afraid of disagreements. So it's taboo to talk religion and politics. So that means that everybody just talks about superficial stuff that doesn't really matter. Start breaking the norms. Let's start breaking the norms, and let's respectfully and congenially just be willing to find out what somebody else really believes, and not get all mad if they disagree with us, but actually just why is it taboo to talk religion and politics? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. So everybody in your sphere of influence, do they know that Asa Hutchinson has a primary challenger? Do they know? Do they know what the stakes are? Just tell somebody what the stakes are in the governor's race. Tell somebody what the stakes are in your local House race or your Senate race. Tell them what the stakes are. Everybody in your sphere of influence. Because whatever the people decide, that's what the people decide. It is what it is. Phone number is 870-275-9799. Did you guys see this? What's going on in the Valonia School District? I tell you, I can't believe this. I cannot believe what's going on in the Valonia School District right now. It's pretty frustrating to me because you always hear all these mass shootings. Anytime there's a mass shooting, there's all the warning signs, right? Everybody's like, I'm not surprised that's the kid that did it. Yeah, that's the kid that's, always writing, die. He's always carving die on the, on the bathroom walls or drawing, he's always just weird. He's a weird guy. And there's something wrong with him. There's something off with him. Every one of these guys that ends up going into a school and doing these horrific things, there's a ton of warning signs. And wouldn't you know it, our system is set up to be so convoluted that a local community, when they see those warning signs and they try to act to do something about those warning signs, the government steps in and says, no, you can't do anything because this child is entitled to an education. Here's my question to those of you in the Valonia area and all across Arkansas. At what point does a local community get to say, no, you're not entitled to an education if you are threatening other students and are a ticking time bomb and have access to weapons? At what point can a local community at what point should a local community be able to govern themselves against the interference of the state or whatever law they want to try to apply and say, no, you're not entitled to an education? Now, that's a very, for liberals, their heads explode when I even say that. But see, I for one, I think local communities should be able to say that because, again, in all of these instances where there are mass shootings, everybody knows, yep, we all knew if it was ever going to happen, it was going to be that guy. The guy just might as well walk around with a lit fuse on his head because it's just a matter of time, and everybody knows it. For those of you who don't know this story, it's the headline here from Linda Satter in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Arkansas School District told to allow return of boy suspended after social media remarks and a photo with a gun. And it's much worse than that. They've got chats with him and other students where he talks about, hey, I have a gun, or hey, I want to kill myself, or oh, sometimes I just want to murder everything. That's an actual quote. Sometimes I just want to murder everything. And yet we have him basically, because he has a disability, he has brain damage of some kind, this boy does, There's a Disabilities Act that comes into play, and they're saying that he has to be put back into the general population of the school. Lisa Satter writing, a student who is considered disabled because of brain injuries, the 15-year-old is protected by Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which requires the district to provide him with a free and public education in the least restrictive environment available. Although records show he is oppositional defiant disorder, which means he misbehaves, and has acted out at school in the past, an individual educational assessment performed in October determined he should be placed in the general education setting alongside other students 98% of the time. Under federal law, the boy's suspension was limited to 10 school days. However, citing concern for other students and staff members, the district filed a petition March 27th. The district is trying to do the right thing to protect the general public. Filed a petition March 27th in Faulkner County Circuit Court to prevent enforcement of a stay-put provision in the law. They wanted to prevent the boy from returning to the school after the 2-week suspension, which was followed by a week of spring break, until he could be reevaluated. The boy's parents, on the other hand, they had the case transferred to federal court because they think he should get to go back to school after this. After the hearing, there was a hearing. Officer ordered the boy returned to classes on April 25th, saying the district hadn't proved he was dangerous. He hadn't proved he was dangerous. They ended up getting more evidence submitted into the record. They had images of a conversation. The Gazette writes, the special education student wrote, "You're going to miss me when I do this expletive. When I do this expletive." Starts with an S. Someone replied, "Do what?" And the boy responded, "You'll see." The other person replied, "Stop." Then a third person in the conversation chimed in, "Bro, chill. TF out. Don't do S, please." The boy replied, "Y'all think I'm playing." The boy also wrote that he was, quote, "just going back to the hospital." When asked why, he said, "Belt around my neck." At that point, the special education student told another boy, "I put a bullet in yo spleen," prompting the third person to intervene by saying, "No, we are not doing this. Guys, chill." This is the guy. Now, first of all, you talk about disability. The guy is clearly able to use social media in some context, and he's been photographed with a gun. And I think initially, wasn't there like a photo with like an X on somebody's face or something? Is that what actually happened? The district initially is concerned about potentially suicidal and homicidal remarks the boy made on social media and private conversations. In some photographs he posted of himself holding a gun, district officials have refused to let him back on campus. And now they're going to have to. Now, school is almost out anyway. But let's just think about this for a second, okay? Here's the real question. You want to know what the real question here is? At what point does a local community have the freedom to say, no, you are not entitled to an education at this place? Maybe they send teachers to his house or something. I don't know. What I'm saying is, at what point? And every single one of these mass shootings, the liberals are claiming it's the gun's fault, and the conservatives are saying, no, it's mental health, people. It's mental health. And yet we have laws that are set up that are preventing the school district of Valonia from being able to govern themselves when it is obvious that there is something not right here. That is something not right here. I know we got to go to break. At what point does a local school district get to say, no, you're not entitled to an education here with us? And that is all about local governance and local control. And we need to have more of it, independent of centralized government authority. Back in a moment.
Hello, this is Frank Glidewell, and I'm asking for your vote for State Senate. I've had the privilege of serving as Justice of the Peace, County Judge, and State Representative. I've always done so with honesty and integrity. I've owned a small business for 30 years. We've got a major problem in Arkansas with the corrupt politicians. I have no special interest supporting my campaign. I am the only Republican candidate in my race who has not voted for Obamacare. That is taking hundreds of millions of dollars a year away from our schools, roads, and law enforcement.
Paid for by Frank Gladwell.
This is ASA News, The Parrot. With breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. I'm Bob Maloney. There are reports circling around from politicians who are in the know, and the same phrase keeps being used. That phrase is new revenue generation. Let's go to our reporter on the ground from the Capitol, Haley Hogwash. Haley?
Thanks, Bob. Yes, it seems the more politicians I talk to, the more I hear the phrase new revenue generation. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means, but you can rest assured it will be good for the people of Arkansas.
Haley, it certainly sounds like something good. I like how the phrase uses the word generation. That makes me think this has got to be doing something positive for our children in the future. Haley?
Yes, Bob, some new developments. I've just been speaking to some people who are here and are not politicians, and they tell me the phrase new revenue generation is actually code for a new tax.
Oh, my. Well, if this is true, Haley, that would add to a growing list of new taxes that have barely made any headlines at all, so it's best not to discuss them here on ASA News, The Parrot.
Yes, Bob, I know it's sure to make government officials angry that their phrasing of the new revenue generation has been changed by the people and called a tax increase.
I would expect an announcement from Mother Government soon to set the record straight. What is the new tax? Revenue generation, Haley?
Well, this new tax, a new revenue generation would add to a growing list. First, there was a revenue generation on movies, books, and songs that people download using the internet. And next, there was the tax increase. I'm sorry, Bob, the new revenue generation on all purchases made using the internet. And now I'm told this new revenue generation is a tax on the people's patience.
I realize the people don't like it, Haley, but specifically, what is the new tax? Revenue generation.
No, Bob, I'm telling you, according to the activists here at the Capitol who have gathered and are listening to some radio broadcast, the revenue generation is literally taxing the patience of the people of Arkansas. I'm told the less patience you have with the government
better not tax our patience.
The more they will tax your patience and the more money you will owe at a later date. I'm also told the collection method on taxing your patients will be decided in a newly formed multicolored ribbon task force.
How taxing.
PHP Parody.
Chaos here with a school shooting. It's
the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
When these school shootings happen, okay, it is absolutely a tragedy, and there's always people saying, why can't we do something about mental health? Aside from the liberals that think that guns are sentient beings and they actually float around and kill people. I went and found another article about this Valonia school district situation where they're trying to remove this child. Now they've been ordered to put him back in, and the judge is saying, how dare he was without an education for this entire time. It's like, yeah, I think that's a consequence. If we think he's going to hurt other students, it's a consequence that when he's out of school, he just may not have an education for a little while. I think that's a sacrifice that we can make. A boy who's got disabilities, but it goes on social media and says this. This is a quote from an earlier article. Later in the day, school officials also found an audio recording the boy had posted on the same social media platform, Snapchat, saying, "For all you PF out there that think you can beat my A, I wish the F you would do so, that I fight to kill, I don't fight to hurt people." And they reported finding another image in which the boy had drawn a red circle around the head of another male student in a photograph. I mean, what other, and posing with guns and then the other stuff, at what point does a local school district get to say, "No, sir, you're not entitled to an education in this community. Here's a fidget spinner, here's a Tide Pod, go away, kid, you're bothering me"?
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Because that is so common in state government. I retired with 28 years with the state of Arkansas. You know what? That doesn't surprise me at all. It happens every day all across the state, and it has for the last 30-plus years. One time when I first started back in the 80s, I said that I wouldn't vote for the governor, and that was Bill Clinton at the time. And I was called into my boss's office and threatened with termination because I didn't support the sitting governor. The promotion practices, the hiring practices, it's very common to know who's going to get hired or who's going to get a promotion before the board's ever held. It depends on who you know, who likes you, and very seldom is it actually about who the most qualified candidate is. And that's a sad statement on our government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It really is. Well, I'm glad they stepped up. And I'm glad that they're, just at least putting their story out there. I wonder if there's any more who will, put their stories out there. What do you think?
I think that it's zero chance of it, Paul, if they're still employed. Mm-hmm. The repercussions of losing your job, of getting transferred to somewhere you don't want to be away from your family, getting reassigned to a job that you don't want, can't do, not qualified for simply because you're not listening to the powers that be. That's a real problem in state government. That needs some reform.
Yeah.
The governor talks about he's going to consolidate state agencies. What he really needs to do is take a hard look at this good old boy system we got leading the state of Arkansas government. We should be hiring the best and the brightest. And too many times we hire who's liked, who's a friend of someone with political power. And it's not just the governor, but that's a problem. When I started in the 80s, okay, I can understand that. But here we are, 2018. You would think that Bill Clinton-style government would be gone. And instead, we're seeing it increasing under this governor. And that needs to go. Yeah. It's time for the people to stand up and say enough's enough.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We are living still in the shadow of Bill Clinton and all of these agencies and everything else. And it does. They just need to implement the reform that the Republican Party claims that it stands for, okay? And I know we're talking about government, and I know government is a behemoth, and I know I don't think you can ever truly.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, anyway, don't go eat a Tide Pod. I mean, there's since this millennial trend, you've had this huge uptick in people calling poison control. Just want to make sure everybody knows that that was in jest. Anyway, we have State Representative Charlotte Douglas is joining us from District 75, calling in this morning. Good morning, Charlotte. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm glad that you could come on. I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of what's been going on, really specifically in this District 5 Senate race. Have you been following this District 5 Senate race between State Representative Bob Ballinger and Senator Brian King?
Yes, sir, I have, with just much sadness, actually, toward the process of how we elect people. And in particular, I have seen where candidates are using scorecards to, in my opinion, trick the public into believing that they are, the candidate of choice just because they get an A on a certain scorecard. And I just see a need for some kind of, almost like a clearinghouse for the scorecard itself. What kind of integrity does it have?
Yeah.
What kind of questions were asked? And this has been a problem in this district, in the Senate 5 race. I see it as a problem.
Yeah. So there was one election guide or whatever that was reportedly inserted into church bulletins this past Sunday. Did you hear about those reports?
I heard about it, and if it's the election guide that I have also seen, when you get on their website, those are the only two candidates that they chose to even score. So why would a statewide election guide just score one Senate race and not be, are they funded by one candidate? It just makes you question, where's the transparency? And when you look at the election guide, it's not truth about Bob Ballinger. He says he opposes Obamacare, but he only opposed it in 2013, and then he flipped his vote in 2015 and 2017. So,
yeah, I see
if this is in a church bulletin, you would hope that this would even at least be the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not.
Where
it's
it
not
says,
true about the Freedom of Information Act as well, and his support there.
Yeah, that is interesting. Authorizes private purchase of health insurance with Medicaid funds. Says that Bob Ballinger opposes that.
And if you look at the link, it's only to his 2013 vote.
Yeah, it's not. It's not the subsequent votes after that.
No.
Yeah, that is suspect.
And I think the public needs to know that Bob Ballinger stood strong for the Freedom of Information Act, and then, under pressure from the governor and from big business, he went in and watered that down under the cover of night, using all kinds of committee tricks to water that down and bring back a bill that big business and the governor, okayed. And then some of us that did not vote for that, of course, the public may not understand that we didn't want to vote for the watered-down version. So how do you reflect that in a voter's guide?
Yeah. Yeah, the it's really hard to convey a lot of times the process of what actually happens down there with what the end result is. And we see that with a lot of bills. A lot of times we have it's amazing, the Republican Party, the leaders of the Republican Party put true conservatives in awful positions. I mean, just really terrible positions. And it sure is a shame. And I just want to point out, there's on this particular election guide that was inserted into church bulletins, there's a lot of pro-life bills here, or supposed pro-life bills, and I just want to say both of these men, Bob Ballinger and Brian King, they both have the endorsement of Arkansas Right to Life. Both of them do. And so to try to put out a voter guide, saying something different is just a little strange to me.
Well, and does your life work? Does your philosophy? Do your conversations? The way you conduct your life, does that not count? Because sometimes you're not in your seat for a vote. But people around me know how I stand on things. We know that Senator King stands for, the value of life. But just because he wasn't in his seat for a vote, maybe, then or maybe if a bunch of bills were bundled in the Senate and he didn't like one of the 10 that was bundled and he didn't vote on that bundle.
Yep.
Public does not understand the process unless we educate them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing a great job of doing that. But
the
NRA is not have lost their integrity in the way that they send out their surveys, and they'll ding you off of one question that you answered wrong, but don't even recognize that you have stood strong, for 6, 12 years fighting for gun rights. And then, so the body of your work does not count.
Mm-hmm.
Americans for Prosperity is doing the same thing. They have lost their integrity in the state because they pick and choose people that they have grown to be friends with, and then they alter elections by backing one or the other. And it's not off of the body of our work. It's not off of what we stood strong for. It's off of who they have become friends with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking with State Representative Charlotte Douglas. That's not the first time I've heard that about Americans for Prosperity, how they've let their personal relationships now basically trump the principles that they claim to stand for, and that's really sad to see them do that. Now, Charlotte, I want to talk to you about the corruption in Arkansas, the environment down at the Marble Palace, and the reason is because we're talking here about Senator Brian King, who is he is the one who is always trying to talk about transparency, Medicaid disclosure, and he fights those guys down there. I mean, he fights the status quo, and so do you. And because I remember you down there, talking in Little Rock at one of those conventions, and you said you got to know your price. Can you just please just kind of go over what you meant about if you go down there to serve, you have to know your price?
I've always tried to tell new candidates, you need to think about before you get down there, what is a possible weakness that you have in your life or that your family may have, because they're going to know it. And the first tough vote that comes up, you'll be called down there, and it's a possibility that they'll use those weaknesses to get to your vote. So you need to know before you go down there, am I going to allow that to become public? In other words, maybe I have a son that has a criminal conviction, or I have a husband that wants wants to be advanced at work. What is it about your life that what is the price that you're willing to pay, either to sell a vote or to stand strong on a vote? And if you make those decisions before you get down there, you can stand stronger instead of letting them catch you off guard once you get down there. But you will have to figure out what your price is. In one way or another, it may just be simple leadership or a committee chair, but you will ultimately, pay a price or get rewarded.
Yeah.
It's going to be one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're saying is you got to calculate that. You got to look at, okay, are they going to try to, if I don't vote the way they want, are they going to threaten to take a family member's business license away? Are they going to is there going to be an audit now or something like that? You've got to be willing, unfortunately, to put up with that if you're going to stand strong, but you've got to recognize that that's the environment that you're in. And if you're not going to sell out, there's a possibility that they're going to find your weakness and your vulnerability, and they're going to squeeze, just like the mob does, by the way.
Yes. If you're in financial trouble, will it mean, paying your bills at the bank? I mean, we don't know how far they go. If you need a job, are they going to give you a job somewhere? But the reason why I am making this last stand in my district for Senator King is because he does not go down there and give away his vote. He stands strong. And I've seen him in committee. I've voted for his things in committee. And I've watched the other conservatives around me melt and not come to his defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a travesty that he can have the good bills that he has had. And, you know, those of us that say that we're conservative and we tell the people back home, we're standing for your liberties. But then when you have the first chance to make a tough stand, you're silent. And that's happened in committee. That happened with Bob Ballinger as the chair of state agencies. He stood silent when he had a chance to help with that transparency bill that Senator King had.
Yeah, and when he came on the program, and I asked him, you said you thought it was a good idea, but you thought it was, you wanted to amend it, but he didn't offer an amendment. And I asked him, I said, does your law firm have any Medicaid clients? As far as Medicaid disclosure, that's what this was all about. And Bob Ballinger said he didn't know. He doesn't know if his law firm, has any Medicaid clients. It's just, come on. This bill has been stopped too many times for us not to be very suspect. Every other business or industry, legislators have to report this. If you have a lawn care company and you're a legislator and your lawn care company gets a contract with, let's say, a state-funded college, you have to disclose that. You just have to say, hey, they're giving me money to cut their grass. But for some reason, when it comes to health care, we don't have to apply that same standard, and that's very suspect.
It is, and it was very timely that he ran that. And then you look at the problems that we're in now. Senator King seems to be always on the cusp of the next crisis. And as he offers the solution, the legislature is not willing to take his solution, because we can come back to this. They would have to pay a price if his bills were, adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Either they wouldn't be able to get that kickback, or they wouldn't be able to, get that job later. And so they're not willing to pay that price once they get up here. I just feel like, how do we get that information to the public that a statesman like Senator King is getting blasted in the mail by these false reporting scorecards, and the people that are putting scorecards out have paid a price to somebody.
Yeah. I have one more question, and we got to wrap this up. But we're talking with State Representative Charlotte Douglas, and I have noticed something. I have noticed, and this is not 100% of the time, but most of the time, when you have a legislator who has a real job back home and is not dependent financially on the job, on the money they get from being a senator or being a state rep, when they have a job to go back to, a business to tend to, most of the time they're more independent and they have a more conservative voting record. Do you see that trend as well?
I do, and it's partly a function of how much we're paid. How do you come down here for the pay that we get and sacrifice your job at home? Because you're going to have to do one or the other. If you are working at home, then you're not going to be down here as much. You may miss them both. So people are critical of us not being here, but being at home and working our jobs is what gives us the independence to make those tough votes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being dependent upon the salary that we're getting down here, or the lobbyists that are putting money in your pocket, or the promise of a job later. The independence from having work at home and having, to stay at home and work those jobs is almost criticized.
Yeah, they want you to be a part of of the machine down there, and it's you're easier to control if you're there all the time. That's certainly true.
And if you're dependent upon that money, yes.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I appreciate the education that you do.
Well,
for the public.
I appreciate you, State Representative Charlotte Douglas, and I appreciate your endorsement of Brian King, and I hope people in District 5 are listening, and I know they are, and I think this is going to be a interesting race, but I think what's on the voters' minds are they want to stop corruption, and there's one candidate in that race, Senator King, who is trying actively to stop what's been going on down there. And over time, he's right. Every time, like you said, he's always on the cusp of saying exactly what's going to happen, what the next crisis is. And yet the leadership still is upheld as credible leaders when it's just spiraling out of control. So, State Representative Charlotte Douglas, I appreciate you so much coming on the program.
Help us get the vote out. Thank you.
All righty. Folks, we got to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.
It's been said that freedom is in the DNA of every American, and I would say every Arkansan. Our nation and state are now in danger of letting our God-given freedom slip away by allowing government to be the arbiter of freedom. I agree with President Ronald Reagan, who said, and I quote, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem," end quote. Government is too large, too overreaching, and too corrupt. President Reagan also said, and I quote, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help,' end quote. This race is about voting for the candidate who best represents your interest, your family, and your future. For the last 2 terms in office, I've kept my promises to you, and I ask for your help to continue to represent our joint values of faith, family, and a protected future. I'm State Representative Dan Sullivan, and the choice is clear. I ask for your vote to continue our stand for freedom. Early voting is underway, and the election is May 22nd.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Arkansans need a true judicial conservative on the Supreme Court. David Sterling is that man. Sterling believes in the separation of powers in our government, and he will interpret the Constitution based on the original intent of the Founding Fathers. A member of the NRA and the Christian Legal Society, Sterling will serve Arkansans with honor and integrity as our next Supreme Court Justice. On May 22nd, vote David Sterling.
Paid for by Friends of David Sterling.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
With public corruption and scandals in the news daily, Arkansans need someone with honesty and integrity in the state Senate. Mark Johnson is that man. Mark Johnson isn't a politician. He's a 5th-generation Arkansan and a successful small business owner. Mark Johnson will make ethics a priority and demand swift punishment for those who violate the public trust. Mark Johnson is pro-life and supports the Second Amendment. In the Republican primary, vote Mark Johnson for the state Senate. Paid for by Mark Johnson for Arkansas.
bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
John Moritz, Northwest Arkansas Online. We told you about this in the first hour, but I'm going to revisit it. There's all this talk about dark money. People are really essentially, when they get upset about dark money, they don't like the Citizens United case because they don't like the First Amendment and they don't like the freedom of association. They don't like the idea that you can spend money and not say who you are. What they don't understand is that a perfect system? Of course not. There's no such thing as a perfect system, but the opposite makes you vulnerable for political reprisals, makes you vulnerable for that exact same thing we were just talking about with Charlotte Douglas, the idea that they will find where you're vulnerable and squeeze. They're all upset over the Supreme Court justice race, which will be held on May 22nd with the other primaries. They're mad about the Judicial Crisis Network attacking Courtney Goodson, the sitting Chief Justice, trying to maintain her power. And, of course, there was a lawsuit filed for defamation in a Northwest Arkansas court. Washington County Circuit Judge Doug Martin issued a temporary restraining order Monday saying the Judicial Crisis Network ads had to be removed from television stations in the Northwest Arkansas area. Courtney Goodson is married to class action attorney John Goodson, a partner at the Texarkana law firm Keel and Goodson. Interestingly enough, Circuit Judge Doug Martin, in a 2017 financial statement of financial interest, the judge reported that his wife, Amy, earned more than $12,500 for legal services performed at Keel and Goodson. We don't know the official number. We just know it's more than $12,500. Now, folks, that's why I'm telling you right now, it's frustrating because essentially what we have here is we have the appearance of corruption. It seems constant that we have the appearance of corruption. I said in the first hour, corruption or the appearance of corruption is the hottest selling cologne in Arkansas. If you look a little further at this story, we have also a connection, I'm told, to Lamoureux here in this. So, I mean, you do the math. Why did the ads get pulled? Is it because it was actual defamation? I mean, listen. The only thing that's different about Judicial Crisis Network's tactics against Courtney Goodson is they're now saying that she advocated for raising her salary. That's the only thing different. The rest of the attacks are what they were 2 years ago, and it didn't take them that long. I mean, why didn't you sue for what happened 2 years ago? Right? In Arkansas, Justice Courtney Goodson accepted a trip to Italy worth $50,000, the Washington Post. Arkansas Democrat Gazette, she has written or joined opinions which experts say are friendly to class action plaintiff lawyers. Again, the connection. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette even did a story about her husband, John Goodson. They did a story about how, hey, before all the contributions from trial lawyers started coming in, their record was, I don't know, it was X. Their record was X in front of the Supreme Court. Once the contributions came in, their winning percentage went up exponentially, or went up a whole lot. So, anyway, very interesting. And again, the Democrat Gazette is the one saying that, hey, look, the judge's wife that issued the injunction here had income from Courtney Goodson's husband's law firm. Oh, I mean, I'm telling you right now, it is such a tangled web out there. In Arkansas, we need reform so bad, guys. We're living in the shadow of Bill Clinton. Can you feel it? And the people have been voting for Republicans because they thought the Republicans would bring reform to all of this. Reform. Where is it? Again, who should be capping corruption? Well, we the voters are going to cap it on May 22nd. But Asa Hutchinson should be capping it. And instead, he's fertilized it. And he's not. Where is his plan? Where is his plan for reform to end this good old boy system and the oppressive nature of it on the people of Arkansas?